Sara Sharif was born on the 11th of January 2013. She was born in Slough. Do you know who else is from Slough? Yes, me. Sara was full of personality. She loved her baby brother and cared for him lovingly. Her mother, Olga Domin, said that Sara was always smiling and had her own unique character. A teaching assistant at her primary school said that Sara was a bubbly, confident, chatty and engaging child. Her father, however, was Urfan Sharif. He came to the UK from Pakistan on a student visa in 2003. And trust me, as a Pakistani myself, he did not come to study. See, his past relationships are just horrific. There were 3 Polish women, including Sara's biological mother, Olga. They all reported Urfan to Surrey police for holding them captive and threatening and controlling them. Who holds a woman captive? What the hell? Now, Urfan and Beinash Batool began a relationship in late 2014, and by 2015 they were living together. Urfan and Beinash are 2 of the main suspects in this case. In fact, this is how sinister Beinash is. Check this out. When she met Urfan, she told him she was divorced. Her ex-husband had been jailed for drug dealing. Now, with her ex, she had twins. So Urfan would take Beinash to family members who were taking care of these twins. He would drop her off and he would pick her up. She would make gifts and presents for these children. But as time passed by, her ex-husband, who was in prison, would write to Beinash and ask to see his children. But she wouldn't let him. You know why? Because there were no children. She had made up the entire story. Why? I have no idea. It could be that there were other children, but they were not her ex-husbands. But the only way to explain the children was to say they're her ex-husbands. Who knows? But it goes to show the sinister nature of who she is. Now, Urfan only had supervised contact with Sara and her older brother. From then until March 2019, Sara and her brother would stay with him on weekends and during school holidays. In March 2019, Sara and her older brother made allegations of abuse at the hands of their mother, Olga, and from then on, they lived with Urfan in his house. Eventually, a court awarded Urfan custody of the 2 children. By then, Urfan and Beinash had 3 children together. They had 2 female twins that were born in January 2016. As they grew older, their behavior became very challenging. In December 2018, they had a son together who also suffered from ill health. They had another son who was born in July 2022. So by the summer of 2022, the family consisted of 2 adults and 6 children. They lived together in a small apartment. Now, one thing I do want to mention, and one of the reasons why I made this case is because, if you couldn't tell, I'm Pakistani as well. 3 Polish women. Why did this guy go after 3 Polish women? Well, it's because he was looking for a marriage of convenience. See, he came to England on a student visa, but his entire purpose was to work and send money back home. Of course, the visa isn't forever, so the only way he could have stayed would have been marriage. And there's many Pakistanis in England, and I know this because plenty of my family members, where they'll get into a relationship with some kind of European woman and make this relationship look real, so then after a 2 or 3 year period where they've got statements of living together, pictures of being together, they can then apply for a marriage license and then apply for citizenship. You understand the scam, right? But that didn't work for Urfan because he was a idiot. Now, as Urfan was working as a taxi driver, Beinash spent her time at home looking after the children. His assaults on Sara commenced in 2019. From then on, Beinash regularly reported to her sisters that he would go crazy and assault Sara. Sometimes she would send photos to her sisters of the bruises on Sara's body. He would make her stand against the wall, holding her arms up, or make her do sit-ups. On other occasions, he was cuddling his son, and at the same time, he was assaulting Sara on the face. A mark could be seen on her forehead. Twice in June 2022 and again in April 23, he took Sara out of school and he homeschooled her. This was because she had so many injuries that everyone would have seen them. It had become so obvious that he was worried the authorities would find her. It's clear that Sara was singled out amongst the children for this kind of treatment, because police found no evidence of violence towards her other siblings, despite the fact that the behavior of the newborn twins was much more challenging than Sara's ever was. It's clear that from a very young age, Sara was treated as a skivvy in the family. From the age of 6 or 7, she was made to do the washing up and to hang up the clothes. She also had to tidy the house. She was made to take a major role in caring for her youngest brother. Although from time to time, Beinash would perform some acts of kindness towards Sara, such as buying her clothes, in general, neither of them had any concern for the happiness or quality of this small child. They treated her as if she was worthless. In one message Beinash sent to her friends, she said, "I think Sara is a demon." And though Sara was being homeschooled, there is no evidence that she received any form of education whatsoever. The pretext of homeschooling was simply a ruse adopted for wholly selfish purposes, to cover up the abuse to which Sara was subject and to continue with the abuse beyond the gaze of the authorities. For some time, Sara was made to wear the hijab and her whole body was covered up. But this was not for any religious reasons. Beinash didn't wear the hijab, nor did any women in her family. This was another expedient to cover up the bruises that were all over Sara's body. One of the reasons Urfan inflicted such assaults was because he considered it to be his right to impose discipline upon her. Sara was brave, feisty and a spirited child. She was not submissive as he wanted her to be. She stood up to him, but he considered that her behavior entitled him to chastise her physically. His ego and sense of self-importance were boosted by the power that he wielded over her and the rest of the family. Both Urfan and Beinash were heard by neighbors yelling and swearing at Sara. There was one occasion in February 2022 where Beinash saw a solicitor and took advice about a divorce and about obtaining a non-molestation order and arrangement orders for her stepchildren, but she took it no further. She did not intervene to stop Urfan from assaulting Sara. She did not protect Sara because she was concerned if she did, the other children would be taken away from her. In fact, she took active steps to cover up for her husband. She would sometimes put makeup on Sara's bruises when she went to school to conceal them from her teachers. Sara began to vomit up food and at times she soiled herself. This was a reaction to all the assaults to which she experienced. When Sara soiled herself, Beinash would ring Urfan and would call him to come home, knowing very well that he would deal with it by assaulting her. Now, in this case, there was another suspect, a man by the name of Faisal Malik. He is the brother of Urfan. He arrived in December 2022. He came from Pakistan to undertake a postgraduate course at Portsmouth University. Now, when I read that, I thought, bullshit. What a load of bollocks. He didn't come to continue his education. Same cycle. He came, make money, send it back, try and find a woman to get married, get a passport and stay. And that is one of the reasons why I made this video. There are some cultural nuances that were overlooked when others reported on this case. I'm going to come on to them in a second. So Faisal was aware of the torture that was being perpetrated against Sara. This cheeky bastard claimed he was too busy on his phone or listening to his earbuds to notice anything going on. You silly sausage, you have eyes, don't you? He said for cultural reasons he could have only seen Sara when she was fully dressed. This is why he never acted. Even a neighbor came to the house, knocked on the door and said, "Is everything okay?" They slammed the door in her face. The neighbor reported hearing constant crying and screaming. Now, as a result of a brain injury, Sara suffered a decline in the few days before she died. In the early evening on Tuesday, August the 8th, Beinash saw that Sara was acting as if she was very unwell. She was worried and telephoned Urfan to come home. Beinash and Urfan assumed Sara was acting up and faking illness. When Urfan came home, he found Sara floppy in Beinash's arms. He did not seek medical help for her. He did not comfort her. Instead, he took up a metal pole and assaulted Sara vigorously on her abdomen for pretending to be ill. A few moments later, Sara died. Now, when she died, Sara had at least 71 separate fresh injuries on her body, mainly bruises and abrasions in various places. It was on August 10th, 2023 that police discovered Sara's body at the house. On the day of Sara's death, Sara's older brother sent his friend a text message stating his sister had died. Now, police tried tracking down this gruesome threesome, but they all departed from the UK to Pakistan a day before Sara's body was found. Now, some of you may not know this, but one thing Pakistanis do is when their son or their kid, or when shit goes down with police and you might go to prison or something, they'll run back to Pakistan. Because of course it's the third world country. And they assume if they stay there for 6, 7, 8 months, then the police will forget about it. This used to work back in the day. I know so many friends and cousins and family members who, drugs or whatever, were wanted by police. They pissed off back home. 6 months to a year later, Whatever, nothing happened. So while Urfan was in Pakistan, he actually called the police. He admitted that he took his daughter's life. He said, "It wasn't my intention to do this, but I assaulted her too much." Now when police found Sara, she had been injured on her head, her face, her chest, her abdomen, and on each of her arms and legs. Some of the marks were consistent with restraints being used, in other words, with Sara being tied up. Many of these injuries had tramline markings, which showed that she had been injured with an object. Urfan admitted to injuring Sara on a number of occasions with a metal pole. The pole was found at the property after Sara's death. He also admitted to injuring Sara with a cricket bat, which was also found at the property. He admitted to injuring her on the head with a mobile phone. And in addition to the 71 fresh injuries, the medical experts found a total of 25 separate fractures to the bones in Sara's body. 25 fractures. Wow. These included a fractured collarbone, 2 fractured shoulder blades, fractured ribs, a fractured humerus, 11 separate fractures to her spinal column, and fractures to bones in both of her hands. The medical evidence stated that many of these injuries were highly unusual in a child. In fact, road traffic accidents didn't even come up with these kinds of injuries. They would have required multiple episodes of violence, each involving a substantial degree of force. These fractures were dated variously between 8 weeks before death and 2 weeks before her death. This is not a case of a single episode of maltreatment. This poor child was injured with great force again and again and again. In fact, the medical experts identified a fracture in the hyoid bone in Sara's neck. I never heard of that bone before this case. It's as if he targeted every single bone. Sara sustained a serious brain injury a few days before she died as a result of an injury to her head. In addition, she had 2 smolder wounds on her backside. These were in the shape of a sole plate of an iron and matched the iron that was found in the house. How does she have iron marks on her backside? What the fuck? This would have required 2 people to carry out, one to hold Sara down and the other one to press the iron. Sara had this terrible wound on her backside for a number of weeks before she died, but nobody had properly treated it or sought medical help for her. Had she lived, it would have caused permanent disfigurement. In addition, when she died, Sara had open smolder wounds on the bones of inside of each ankle. The only possible explanation for this is that Sara's ankles were tied and then either her feet were wrapped around a hot pipe or more likely simmering water was poured on her ankles. Just gets worse and worse, doesn't it? Once again, the wounds had not been treated and no medical help had been sought for Sara. The post-mortem investigation showed that Sara had 6 chunk marks on her body. 5 of them were on her left arm and 1 was on the inside of her left thigh. These marks were made by an adult. You see, Urfan, Faisal and Sara's older brother each provided teeth impressions and each was excluded from being responsible for the marks. Beinash declined to give a tooth impression and the only possible inference is that it was her who did this. And although the marks were not in themselves fatal injuries, the fact that she was prepared to assault Sara in this way provides an insight into the extent to which she was complicit. But the medical and forensic evidence does not stop there. It's clear in the last few weeks of her life, Sara was tied up. She was trussed up with masking tape and with a skipping rope. Even worse, she was hooded. Plastic bags were put over her head, which were then held in place with masking tape, and a hole was ripped in the plastic bag through which she could breathe. Sara's DNA and hair were found on the masking tape and in one of the hoods. This treatment of a child is nothing short of gruesome. It's hard to imagine how terrifying it must have been for her, but it does get worse. The bins at the house were examined. The police found a soiled nappy wrapped around Sara's leggings, and it's clear that they were putting Sara in a pull-up because she was unable to go to the toilet while she was trussed up. I mean, which 10-year-old wears diapers, right? There was medical evidence that they would then let her stew in her own urine and feces. The medical examiner said that the injuries to Sara's ankles appeared to have been made worse by the fact that her ankles had been in contact with urine and feces. This also means that the restraints were so tight that Sara's feet and ankles were pulled up so that they were in contact with her backside. The medical evidence also shows that at the time of her death, Sara was underweight and undernourished. The pathologist who carried out Sara's post-mortem examination, he said that the cause of death was not specific to a single injury or incident, but that the injuries had suffered cumulatively and they caused Sara's death. So, going back to the three of them, they did not call the police or ambulance when they realized Sara had died. Instead, they immediately sprang into action, fleeing to Pakistan. Within the hour of Sara's death, they were on the phone to a travel agent to arrange for flights to Pakistan for them and the kids. Beinash made the call to the travel agent and can be heard speaking coolly and calmly. They then took steps to cover up what they did. Sara's body was washed, put in clean clothes and placed in a bed. The leggings, diaper, masking tape and hoods were put in bins. The metal pole was hidden away. Faisal, who worked in McDonald's, his uniform was found next to the bins alongside the other items. Urfan removed the Ring doorbell to hide any video evidence. He left a note on Sara's body saying, "This is me, Urfan. I did this to my daughter. I'm running away because I'm scared." The following morning, the three of them took all the remaining children and drove to Heathrow Airport. They stopped on the way to withdraw substantial sums of money from their bank accounts and then flew to Pakistan. They had no concerns for the other children. Remember the twins that were born that were suffering from autism? See, they had a specialist educational support person that was arranged for them. But of course, now that they've gone to Pakistan, who knows how much help the twins have gotten, right? They all then went into hiding in Pakistan. There is no extradition treaty between the UK and Pakistan. Nonetheless, the Pakistani authorities started looking for them. Now, for some reason, the three of them made a video to give to the press saying that Sara's death was an accident, and then they started complaining about how the Pakistani authorities were treating them, putting pressure on Urfan's family. Eventually, in September 2023, the three of them flew back to the UK. Now, in the trial, the jury was shown a video of Sara dancing in front of the TV a few days before she died. It's clear by this stage her mobility was impaired. Amongst the most heartbreaking pieces of evidence in this case, there was a short story that Sara wrote. She described Beinash as beautiful and young. She also made a birthday card in which she said, "Happy birthday dad, I love you so much." She wrote a letter to Urfan and Beinash in which she apologized for answering back and said, "Please forgive me, I'm so sorry." The reality for her was that all these assaults had become normalized. She had known nothing else for much of her life. Urfan and Beinash persuaded her she deserved to be treated this way. Olga Domin, the biological mother of Sara, had the small consolation that her body was returned to Poland for his funeral. She gave a moving victim impact statement telling the world how wonderful the child was and how much this has affected Olga's mental health. So, to conclude, Urfan, for the murder of Sara, was sentenced to life with a minimum term of 40 years. Beinash was sentenced to life with a minimum term of 33 years. Faisal was sentenced to 16 years in prison. Now, I've gone through all the articles, all the comments, from the Daily Mail to the Sun. Actually, no, who reads the Sun? This shit. The Mirror, all the YouTube channels, all the YouTube comments, Instagram, etc. regarding this case. And I've heard a lot of people comment, this is their culture, this is Pakistan, etc., etc. No, that's a lot of bullshit because so many of these cases happen in England and in America or whatever. This has nothing to do with the fact that he was Pakistani, he just so happened to be Pakistani. So I assure you, the reason why he did what he did was simply because he was a fucking moron. A power-hungry, egotistical maniac who thought he was better than everyone else. And because in his life, he had absolutely nothing, so he could go back to Pakistan and show his family, "Oh, look what I've become." The little power he had, he took it all out on the child. Classless wanker. As for Beinash, sitting there twiddling her thumbs, silly cow. Anyway, comment, tell me what you think. In 2009, 3 daughters and a wife were found submerged underwater in Canada in what became a story that rocked a nation. This is the case of the Shafia family murders. And what nobody on YouTube has done is explain to you why this crime happened. The suspects in this case is Muhammad Shafia, who is the father of 3 of the victims, his second wife, Tuba Yahya, and their eldest son, Hamid. The victims themselves were 19-year-old Zainab, 17-year-old Sahar, 13-year-old Geeti, And finally, Rona Omar, the first wife of Muhammad, who was 52. Now, this was a family of Afghan origin. I am of Pakistani origin. They were Muslim. I myself am a practicing Muslim. Their cultural customs and the way I was raised are very similar. So the moment I heard about this case, I knew straight away this bastard Muhammad only cared about one thing, and that is pride. Now let's start with their backgrounds. In 1980, Muhammad Shafia married Rona Muhammad. However, she was infertile and unable to have children. So in 1989, he took Tuba to be his second wife in a polygamous marriage. Tuba gave birth to 7 children. Though Rona played a crucial role in their upbringing and raised the children as if they were her own, when the family immigrated to Canada, Rona was presented as an aunt. The reason she wasn't presented as a second wife, well, number one, it's illegal in Canada from what I know, and number two, it's just a bit funny, isn't it? Second wife? What the bloody hell's going on here, chap? But do understand though, Rona was the one who encouraged Muhammad to get a second wife. She even helped him pick the wife as they needed to have children. So the Shafia family immigrated into Canada and settled in Montreal in 2007. Rona, however, was trapped in an abusive, loveless marriage, trying in vain to convince her husband to grant her a divorce. Rona's siblings claimed that she feared for her life during the days leading up to her death. Tuba, the second wife, allegedly said to Rona, "You are a slave, you are a servant." Reportedly, the Shafias held all of Rona's identity documents, including her passport, before Muhammad and his family fleeing the Afghan war and everything that came after it. Coming to Canada became a curse. You see, Muhammad was dismayed when it was discovered that the oldest daughter Zainab had taken a Pakistani boyfriend. And this is where I come in to explain why he was so mad. He wasn't necessarily upset she was dating a boy. I mean, in South Asian, Middle Eastern culture, it is frowned upon a little. But to be dating, maybe even fornicating outside of marriage, this does upset the elders. But his main hang-up wasn't this. His hang-up was that she was dating a Pakistani boy. And you must understand, in this specific area of the world, South Asia, nationalism, tribalism, sectarianism is rife. For example, if you live in America or Britain and your son or daughter want to marry a girl from Iceland or whatever, you'd be like, okay, as long as she's a good girl, right? However, in this part of the world, in South Asia, where you are from and your ethnicity holds as much value as what kind of person you are. Remember, this family were Afghans and their ethnicity in general is Pashtun. The boyfriend was Pakistani, so he would have been a Punjabi, like me, slightly darker skinned, brown, whereas if you look at Zainab, she's light skinned. My origins come from India, right? That's my ethnicity if you go back further enough. Their ethnicity, this family, are Afghans, and then before that, Persians, Iran, etc. Hence, the fairer, lighter skin. This is important because if you bring this kind of backward village mentality to Canada, right, you're asking for trouble, as I'm about to tell you. You see, Zainab, who wanted to marry this boyfriend, was upset that her father did not approve. But by the time Muhammad returned from a business trip, Zainab married her boyfriend. However, the marriage was annulled after just one day. What's crazy about all of this is that Muhammad himself had earlier plotted to murder Zainab by drowning her. He suggested to his uncle, an uncle of his in Sweden, why don't we come over there, we'll go on vacation, and then I will kill her. What? And you must be asking, why would he kill her? Don't worry, I'm coming to all of that more. Muhammad also claimed he had no idea that his other daughter Sara had a boyfriend too, not until he discovered pictures while tidying up the house, in preparation for relatives arriving to attend the victims' funerals. Those photos, showing Sahar in a miniskirt in the embrace of a young man, sent him into a tirade. You see, Muhammad would have preferred that Sahar told him about her relationship so that he could have arranged for her marriage. It was only after the deaths that Muhammad said he became aware of the extent of his daughter's secret life. He was only vaguely aware of his 13-year-old Geeti's escalating difficulties in school as well. The child's truancy and discipline issues had required that both parents attend meetings at school. And this is an indication of Muhammad's mindset. You see, to him, his girls are messing around with other men without his permission. And he is afraid that if anyone in the community or back home find out, they're going to ridicule him and they're going to look down on him. Now do you see it? The reason why he's pissed off is nothing to do with modesty or religion or keeping your daughter safe. No. This is all about pride and public opinion. He cared more about what people think about him than the sanctity of his daughters. As for Tuba, she characterized the household as relatively liberal, with no rules preventing the women from wearing makeup, and no obligation to don the traditional headscarf except during prayers. Prescriptions against taking boyfriends had been established on a trip to Dubai. They decided that until the children graduated, they are not to have any girlfriend or boyfriend or get married. And just this bit, I understand. They're saying, look, just finish your education. After that, do what you want. That bit, I kind of get. By the way, if you can, please follow me on Instagram. My previous Instagram was removed, so this is my new one. Link is in the description. Yet Tuba was the one that agreed to organize Zainab's marriage to, the aforementioned Pakistani man, even though they considered him unsuitable. Now we come on to Hamid. He is the brother, but he's also the third suspect. He himself was quite the disciplinarian. If his sisters came home late, he would scorn them and even abuse them like they're little children. Yes, let me repeat, he would physically assault them, because if his sisters were seen out and about late at night, oh my God, what are people going to think? They're going to say so much things about our daughters. I can't allow that to happen. I can't have my sisters to be out at night. That's the mentality. I mean, think about it. If your child or whoever is out late and they come home a little bit late, sure, you're upset for their safety. You might tell them, okay, next time just let me know where you are, but you're not going to abuse them. You understand? What kind of stupid shit is this? In fact, a call to the police was placed in April 2009 because the children were afraid. They were afraid of what would happen once their father knew Zainab had run away from home. When police arrived, Geeti did not hesitate to tell them that a week earlier they got home late, and Muhammad pulled her hair and abused her face. He often threatened them, she told police. Her older brother Hamid had also abused her before. When Muhammad came home that night, the children climbed up and one of them recanted the story. The police constable on scene believed there was enough evidence to support a criminal charge of abuse, but that decision lay in the hands of child welfare authorities and nothing ever happened. Geeti, however, repeated the story to a detective who interviewed her at school the following Monday, although this time she was more evasive. Geeti told the detective she wanted to get out of the house. She wanted to be placed immediately with the foster family. She said she had no freedom. She wanted to be like her friends. She wanted to go out. The detective could not gather enough evidence to support a charge. The file was closed. And this is where parenting comes in, right? As someone who's from a similar background, right, and knowing the mentality of these people, the reason why these girls felt so alone, it wasn't necessarily the restrictions. It's because their father never sat down with them and became their friend. You understand what I'm saying? Of course, let them out. Let them do whatever they want. They're going to make mistakes, but you're supposed to be their friend, especially in the teenage years when emotions can be very fragile. You understand what I'm saying? All of this, however, wasn't the end of Geeti's agitations to leave the household. Her emotions resurfaced a month later at school when she was crying and begging to be removed from the family home. She was crying because she didn't know what to do anymore. Apparently, Geeti and Sahar had hatched a plan to run away together. There had already been a meeting at school at the end of April about the problems. School officials were worried because of the discipline issues and also the allegations of abuse at home. Geeti wrote to her sister, "Dear Sahar, I don't know what I'm going to do if you leave the house one day. I promise that before I die, I'm going to make sure that all your wishes come true. I wish that we are never separated." You see, in Muhammad's mind, the sisters were rebellious. They were dressing in a Western style and provocative clothing, taking unauthorized boyfriends. Zainab wanted to get married. They all wanted out of the house. I mean, what the fuck? And this is a huge problem in these communities. They force their kids to adhere to some cultural policy without ever explaining why it's right or why it's wrong. Again, all they care about is what other people think of them. As for Sahar, she did find love with a boy. His name was Ricardo Sanchez. He was neither Afghan nor Muslim and therefore utterly unacceptable to her parents. He was an immigrant from Honduras, spoke no French and little English. Yet they managed to communicate, finding in each other a soulmate. By the way, the French is important because, of course, they live in Montreal. Sahar and Ricardo dated for 4 months. They had planned an elopement to seek refuge with Ricardo's family in Honduras. Sahar had actually contemplated revealing all to her father during a vacation in Niagara Falls, but Ricardo said no. She should wait for that announcement until they get back to Montreal. Of course, she never got the chance to tell her father. Then there was friction between the mother and daughter, the mother being Tuba, because Tuba decided it was time Sahar donned the hijab. Sahar herself, though, did not want to wear the head covering. She particularly did not want to wear it to school. And again, this is so stupid because number one, yes, in Islam, the woman is obligated to wear some kind of head covering. You know this one that you see in the middle of the face? That's purely a cultural practice, right? If you go to Turkey, you get one kind of headscarf. If you go to Pakistan, you get a different kind of headscarf. If you go to Indonesia, you get a different kind of headscarf, right? So there's different variations. All of them are completely fine. In any case, you cannot force a woman to wear it. That goes against everything Islam says. I'm telling you this as a Muslim. Whether you agree or not, I'm just telling you the situation, right? Furthermore, though, and I think this is more important, if the mother's not wearing it, why is she asking the daughter to wear it? Do you not see the hypocrisy there? Tuba and Muhammad were barely religious. They don't pray 5 times a day like you're supposed to, right? And of course, you can be Muslim and not be that religious, right? But if you are going to tell your daughter to wear the hijab, that suggests religious intent. How is she going to do it when you don't even do it? And in any case, in any religion, right, do you really think it's okay to abuse your child for not adhering to this? It's just madness. Of course, the only reason Tuba wanted her daughter to wear it is then she can show people, look at my daughter, look at the way I raised her, look at this obedient religious child. You understand now why I said pride and vanity? This hypocrisy really makes my dick itch. Furthermore, twice, school staff were so alarmed about what Sahar was telling them about her home life that they called Youth Protection Services. The first time a call was made, in May of 2008, teachers feared Sahar was being subjected to physical violence. She complained about being assaulted with a pair of scissors. But Sahar would not speak to the counselor summoned after being informed that their conversation would be relayed to her parents. Her parents and Hamid denied any ill treatment of Sahar or her siblings, though Hamid acknowledged Sahar was not happy with Tuba's decision that the 2 oldest girls should wear the hijab. In fact, in a further instance, a year later, Sahar told her teacher she was afraid of her father, who was about to return from a business trip abroad. Specifically, Sahar was in a state of high anxiety that Muhammad had learned of her relationship with Ricardo. Child protection authorities were contacted again. The call was made June the 5th, only 25 days before Sahar's death. The social worker who saw her on that date told court that Sahar had disclosed her hopes of renting an apartment. She was asking for money so she could leave her home and settle somewhere else. She was submitted to a lot of control by her older brother. He wanted her to wear the veil, he wanted to pick her friends. And I swear to God, he's in prison right now. I'm going to come on to the crime that actually happened. Hamid was in prison right now, but I'm telling you, if I saw him walking down the street, brother, what a fucking dickhead, wouldn't you all agree? He wanted to pick her friends. This bastard probably never had any friends himself. So, now that I've explained the background of the family, now let me tell you what happened when they died. So the family went on a trip to Niagara Falls, and it's still a little unclear what happened, but the events take place on June the 30th, 2009. You see, a Nissan was found in an unusual location at the picturesque Kingston Mills Locks. The car was wedged into a small space in shallow water. The police diver who swam to the bottom of the canal, in there he found Zainab in the front passenger seat, her face slumped forward, her black cardigan drenched after hours underwater, and it was on backwards. Sahar was in the rear of the Nissan, dressed in a pair of tight jeans and a sleeveless top. Sahar was within reach of her cell phone, about to become a crucial clue for investigators. Geeti's lifeless body was floating over the driver's seat, one arm wrapped around the headrest, the window beside her wide open. Rona was slouched in the middle back seat, her soaked black hair rubbing against Sahar's. You see, the family went together, checked out of the Days Inn on June the 29th, 2009. A surveillance camera in the lobby recorded Hamid paying the bill for both rooms. Two cars left. There was a Lexus and a Nissan. Prosecutors believe Mohammed was behind the wheel of the Nissan. They went right past all of the major exits for Kingston, the ones full of signs for hotels and fast food. Now on Highway 15, the city's final off-ramp, they turned north and steered toward the locks. It was almost 1:30 in the morning. The Nissan passengers were in various states of sleep as they pulled into the Mills parking lot. Mohammed got out of the Nissan and Tuba got in. It was her job to stay with the four corpses to be while her husband and son went looking for a motel. The girls would have no reason to be suspicious, no reason to run. They were with their mother after all. The exact location remains a mystery, but somewhere at that secluded lock station, the four women were held underwater one by one until they stopped moving. Three of them had bruises on the top of their heads, suggesting some kind of injury in those final moments. Dead or at least unconscious, the bodies were piled back inside the Nissan. The idea was to stage a traffic accident to convince the cops that they were dealing with a tragic, late-night joyride. Once in position, the driver left the engine running, got out, reached to the open driver's side window, and moved the gear shift into first, assuming on its own power that the car would plunge over the concrete lip and into the water. However, the front wheels went over the ledge, but nothing else. The car would not move. One of the three reached through the window and turned off the ignition, the three being Mohammed, Tuba, and Hamid. At this point, they only had a choice: to drive the Lexus into the Nissan, so then the Nissan would end up in the water. However, the collision shattered some of the Lexus's headlight and it left bits of plastic on the ground. Before speeding away, the killers scrambled to pick up each of the broken shards. So let me repeat. At some point, they drowned the girls. It's unclear where, right? But from the coroner's report and the injuries to the head, all four women were drowned. Then they were placed in a car to make it look like it was some kind of random accident. So they got one of the girls, put her foot on the accelerator, right? And as the car was going, it wouldn't go any further, it stopped. So the only way they could push the car into the water was by ramming the Lexus into it. So then, after this, Hamid, Mohammed, and Tuba showed up at the police station to file a missing persons report. Their initial stories were all the same. They went on a road trip and they split between two cars. Mohammed, Tuba, and Hamid all told the detective that they had stopped at a Kingston motel on the way home to Montreal, and that Zainab grabbed the car keys to retrieve some clothes. The next morning, the Nissan and nearly half the family were gone, and that's it. I don't know anything else, Mohammed said. So when the bodies were taken to the medical examiner, Dr. Milroy, he saw all the bruises I previously mentioned, and he also saw that Zainab had the same bruises and found it unusual that all three people would have similar injuries. And then at the crime scene, police found those broken bits of plastic I mentioned. So at that moment, they went to Mohammed's house in Montreal and looked at the Lexus SUV. The SUV had bits of plastic missing in the front lights. They also found bits of broken plastic in the trunk. And they made the connection and they considered this a homicide. Now, a week later, just 17 days after the women died, a judge authorized the use of wiretaps. And over the next 3 days, police would record Mohammed cursing his dead daughters and basking in their demise. During another conversation, Tuba agreed that Zainab was already done, but wished the other two, Sahar and Geeti, were still alive. Mohammed replied saying, "No Tuba, they all messed up." And as the police are listening to this all on the wiretap, they had had enough. The next afternoon, officers arrived at their house with a full search warrant. So they began seizing evidence: phone bills, passports, Rona's diary, Hamid's black suitcase. In his bedroom, they found essays about how he wants to control women, etc., etc. In fact, with these wiretaps, they also realized Hamid was on the cell phone. It was with another brother of his, and his brother said, "Look Hamid, you are 100% caught." So when the police went to interview other family members, they all made it clear that yes, it was Tuba, Mohammed and Hamid who did this. They were the ones responsible. So with all the evidence gathered from the house and the wiretaps and the testimony from the other family members, they were all found guilty of first-degree murder, and they were sentenced to life without parole for 25 years. Now, the reason why I took it upon me to make this video is because I know a lot of you live in America, you live in the West. There's so many stories you hear in the media about what goes on in the Middle East and I guess you could say the Muslim world, right? Honor killings, this is what it was classed as, but honor killings, when you hear them, you guys are all confused. Why did this happen? Because it only seems to be a phenomenon from that part of the world, right? Well, honor killings are all about pride, ego, and vanity. Many of you will comment saying, this should not be called an honor killing because there's nothing honorable. Yes, but that's not the point. The point is that the suspect finds their honor being questioned, so then they commit murder. Again, fucking stupid. And by honor, in this case, it's literally what the community or what the public will think of them. The closest thing to help you understand in the Western world is when you call it a crime of passion. If you have a boyfriend or a husband who murders their spouse, right, because she cheated on them, right, his honor, right, his emotions are now being questioned, so he lashes out. It's not an exact like for like, because no two situations in life are the same, but that's the best way I can explain it. So I took it upon myself to 1, explain this story, right? 2, why it happened. And 3, tell people, stop doing this shit. Nobody cares about your honor. Nobody cares about who you are. I've traveled around this area of the world. I've been to Pakistan 6 times. I've been to Morocco. I've been to Dubai. I've been to Turkey. 99% of the day is no different than living here in America. But then you get people like this who just act like dickheads. And I guess all I can do is that when my son or my daughter grow up and they make mistakes, my job is not to condemn them. My job is not to ridicule them, to push them away. My job is to be their friend. Anyway, comment, tell me what you think.